was a crisp, autumn evening in 1986 when a chilling nightmare unfolded. On Halloween night, a 9-year-old boy vanished without a trace. His parents, in a move to protect their family's privacy, have chosen to keep his name secret. The Halloween evening started with the usual excitement: kids in costumes, candy galore, and the thrill of the spooky season. The boy's parents, trusting their child's maturity, allowed him to go trick-or-treating alone. However, as the hours passed and he didn't return, an unsettling fear began to grip the family. The night dragged on, each minute stretching into what felt like an eternity. The darkness seemed to close in tighter with every ticking second. Just as the first light of dawn began to break, a glimmer of hope appeared. The boy, looking both relieved and frightened, finally showed up at the doorstep. But the joy of his return was overshadowed by the terrifying stories he told. He spoke of a stranger who had offered him a ride and an abundance of candy. The man took him to a house where the night took a disturbing turn. Inside, the boy described playing unsettling games and being forced to exchange his clothes for others. The man's actions were deeply troubling, turning a night of fun into a horrifying ordeal. The authorities quickly launched an investigation, hoping to find the house and the man responsible. Yet, the boy struggled to provide clear details. His repeated words, "I don't remember," added to the mystery and frustration. His young mind seemed unable to piece together the locations or the man's identity. As time went on, the mysterious figure who caused so much fear vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Despite numerous efforts, he was never found. The case remains a haunting chapter in the town's history, a dark reminder that even the most innocent nights can hide unimaginable threats. To this day, the story serves as a somber reminder of how quickly things can turn from joyful to terrifying. The boy's experience left scars that linger, a stark testament to the shadows that can fall even on the brightest of nights. On a Halloween night in Florida, a disabled war veteran found himself caught in a tragic and shocking incident that highlighted the dangers of assumptions and misunderstandings. The veteran, a man who had served his country with honor and had returned home with severe injuries that left him half paralyzed, was parked outside a fast food restaurant, sitting quietly in his wheelchair. The evening was supposed to be a time for fun and festivities, with people donning costumes and enjoying the spirit of Halloween. But for this veteran, the night took a dark turn. As he sat there, minding his own business, a man dressed as a Marine in a tutu spotted him. The man, already caught up in the Halloween atmosphere, was filled with a mix of confusion and anger. He looked at the veteran, saw the wheelchair, and without taking a moment to think, he jumped to a terrible conclusion. In his mind, he believed that the veteran was someone dressed up in a costume, a cruel and offensive mockery of war veterans. Fueled by this mistaken belief, the man's anger quickly escalated into violence. He approached the veteran with a fury that was entirely unwarranted, and without a word of explanation, he began to brutally attack him. The disabled veteran, unable to defend himself, was beaten to the ground. The blows were relentless, and the veteran was soon knocked unconscious, lying helplessly on the pavement. It wasn't until the police arrived on the scene that the full extent of the misunderstanding became clear. The attacker, still seething with rage, was ready to justify his actions, thinking he had done the right thing by standing up for veterans. But as the officers took control of the situation and began to question him, the horrifying reality of his mistake was revealed. The man he had attacked wasn't in costume at all. He was a real war veteran, a hero who had already suffered more than most could imagine. The attacker's face drained of color as the truth set in, the anger giving way to shock and disbelief. The police, understanding the gravity of the situation, arrested the man who had let his assumptions and rage lead him to commit such a senseless act of violence. The veteran was taken to the hospital, his body bearing the marks of yet another battle, this time one he never should have had to face. This tragic incident serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of empathy, understanding, and the dangers of jumping to conclusions. On a night meant for lighthearted fun, a moment of thoughtlessness turned deadly serious, leaving one man deeply wounded and another to face the consequences of his actions. If you thought the previous tales of Halloween horror were unsettling, brace yourself, because this next story takes the fear factor to a whole new level. Picture a small, quiet town in Minnesota in the fall of 1999, where Halloween night was typically filled with the usual sights and sounds: children dressed in costumes, laughter echoing through the streets, and front porches lit with the soft glow of jack-o'-lanterns. But on this particular night, something far more sinister was lurking in the shadows. In an unassuming neighborhood, an unknown couple was giving away what appeared to be ordinary brown paper bags filled with Halloween treats. But these bags were anything but ordinary. They were unusually large and heavy, weighing anywhere from 2 to 4 pounds. A weight that would certainly pique the curiosity of any child eager to dig into their Halloween haul. When trick-or-treaters approached the house, they were greeted by a woman who, according to witnesses, would turn to someone unseen behind the door, who would then hand her the bags. As the children received their mysterious gifts, the woman would offer a final, chilling piece of advice: wait until you get home to open it. But this seemingly innocent instruction was only the beginning of the nightmare. The first twist in this dark tale is that the couple handing out the bags didn't actually live in the house. In fact, the house had been vacant for months. It was an eerie sight that didn't go unnoticed by the neighbors, one of whom grew suspicious when they saw the couple getting into a car parked in the driveway as children walked away from the property with the heavy bags in hand. The concerned neighbor, sensing that something was wrong, rushed over to warn parents not to accept the bags. Together, they decided to open one of the bags right there, hoping to uncover whatever unsettling contents lay inside. What they found was beyond their worst nightmares. Inside the brown paper bag was not candy, not toys, but a severed human hand. Shock and horror rippled through the small group as they realized the gravity of the situation. But the terror didn't end there. More bags were discovered, each containing a similar gruesome item. In total, 3 to 6 bags had been handed out that night, and within them were 3 severed hands, 2 left hands and 1 right hand. The implications were horrifying. At least 2 people had likely been killed, their hands dismembered and distributed like twisted party favors. The big questions remain. Who were this mysterious couple, and how did they come into possession of these human hands? What drove them to commit such a monstrous act? And why did they choose this quiet town as the stage for their macabre Halloween stunt? Despite investigations, the identities of the couple and the origin of the hands remain shrouded in mystery, leaving the town, and anyone who hears this chilling story, with a deep sense of unease. The story of the unknown couple and their horrific Halloween gifts serves as a stark reminder that even in the most seemingly innocent of settings, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It was Halloween night in 2001, in a small town in Ohio, and the air was filled with the excitement that only this holiday could bring. Children, dressed in a variety of costumes, roamed the neighborhood streets with their friends, knocking on doors and eagerly shouting "trick or treat" at every doorstep. Their bags and pillowcases, soon to be overflowing with candy, jingled with the sound of coins and the occasional apple dropping in, treats that would later be met with sighs and eye rolls. But the magic of the night made even the less desirable offerings seem fun, as they continued their journey from house to house. However, what happened that night would leave a scar on the town's collective memory, a dark and horrifying twist that no one could have predicted. As the night wore on and children returned home to sort through their spoils, a horrifying discovery was made that turned a joyous night into a nightmare. Kathy Jones, a local mother, was helping her children sift through their candy when she made the chilling discovery. Among the candy bars and lollipops, she found something that made her blood run cold. A human finger, sealed in a goodie bag. It was no trick or toy. This was real, and the horror of it left her in shock. Kathy immediately contacted the police, but little did she know, her family wasn't the only one to receive such a gruesome treat. By the next morning, the police were flooded with similar reports from terrified parents across the neighborhood. More and more disturbing discoveries were being made. Human appendages, including fingers, toes, and even eyeballs, were found tucked among the candy in children's bags. What should have been a night filled with laughter and fun had turned into a grotesque mystery. The police launched an extensive investigation, piecing together the details of each family's trick-or-treat route. They went door to door, questioning homeowners, inspecting every house that had been visited by the children who received the horrifying items. They searched for any signs that might point to the culprit: foul smells, other body parts, or even suspicious behavior from the residents. Despite their efforts, the investigation turned up nothing. There were no clues, no suspects, and no explanation for how these body parts had ended up in the children's candy bags. The identity of the person responsible remained a mystery, leaving the town in a state of fear and unease. What should have been a harmless night of fun had been tainted by an unimaginable act of cruelty, and the community was left to wonder who among them could have been capable of such a heinous act. To this day, the case remains unsolved, and the mystery of the not-so-goody bags continues to haunt the memories of those who lived through that terrifying Halloween night. On Halloween night, in the bustling city of Chicago, a night of trick-or-treating turned into a horrific tragedy for 55-year-old Liddell Peoples and his girlfriend, 49-year-old Maria Adams. What began as a simple disagreement escalated into a deadly altercation, leaving the community in shock. The evening took a dark turn when an argument erupted between Peoples and Adams over something as seemingly trivial as Halloween candy. Allegedly, Adams had taken a bag of Peoples' candy, a gesture that should have been lighthearted. But for reasons that remain deeply unsettling, this small act ignited a violent rage within Peoples. The anger that surged through him was disproportionate to the situation, but it quickly spiraled out of control. In a moment of uncontrollable fury, Peoples grabbed a knife and turned on Adams. He repeatedly stabbed her, his anger manifesting in the brutal act that ultimately took her life. The violence was swift and brutal, leaving Adams with no chance of survival. By the time authorities arrived, it was too late. Maria Adams was gone, and Liddell Peoples was left to face the irreversible consequences of his actions. Upon his arrest, Peoples attempted to justify his actions by explaining that his candy had been taken, as if the loss of something so insignificant could somehow rationalize the heinous crime he had committed. But as anyone could imagine, the legal system was far from sympathetic to his defense. The explanation only served to highlight the senselessness of the act, emphasizing the tragedy of a life lost over something so minor. Peoples was arrested and held on a $2 million bond, a stark reminder that his moment of rage would cost him far more than a bag of candy. The story of Liddell Peoples and Maria Adams serves as a grim reminder of how quickly anger can escalate into violence, turning what should have been a night of harmless fun into a nightmare. It's a cautionary tale about the fragility of human relationships and the devastating impact that unchecked emotions can have, leaving behind a wake of sorrow and disbelief. On Halloween night, Carl Jackson and his girlfriend were driving through the Bronx, enjoying what was supposed to be a festive evening. The streets were filled with the usual Halloween chaos: costumed children trick-or-treating, teenagers causing mischief, and the general buzz of excitement that comes with the holiday. However, what started as a fun night out took a deadly turn when a group of teenagers decided to target Carl's car in an all-too-common Halloween prank. As they drove through the neighborhood, Carl's car was suddenly pelted with eggs by a group of teenagers. The yolks splattered across the windshield, obscuring their view and startling the couple inside. Frustrated and angry, Carl decided to confront the teenagers. He pulled the car over and stepped out, likely expecting the pranksters to scatter at the sight of an adult ready to reprimand them. After all, it was just eggs, an annoyance but nothing that couldn't be cleaned up. But what happened next was far beyond anything Carl could have anticipated. Instead of running away, one of the teenagers, 17-year-old Curtis Sterling, pulled out a gun. Without hesitation, he aimed at Carl and shot him in the chest. The bullet struck with deadly accuracy, and Carl was killed instantly, collapsing to the ground as his girlfriend watched in horror. The senseless act of violence shocked the community. Curtis Sterling, who claimed he was acting in self-defense, argued that he had only been egging the car for fun. But when Carl got out of the vehicle, Curtis claimed he felt threatened and, in a moment of panic, opened fire. Despite his claim, the court found him guilty, But because he was a minor at the time of the crime, Curtis received a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison. The tragic death of Carl Jackson serves as a grim reminder of how quickly a situation can escalate from a harmless prank to a fatal encounter. A night that was meant to be filled with Halloween fun ended in heartbreak and loss, leaving Carl's loved ones to grapple with the senselessness of it all. The community mourned a life cut short, while Curtis Sterling's actions cast a shadow over what should have been just another Halloween night. Carl's story remains a chilling example of how a split-second decision can have devastating consequences, and how what begins as a seemingly innocent prank can end in irreversible tragedy. On Halloween night in 2007, 18-year-old Lisa, a high school senior, was excited to attend a Halloween party at her friend Mick's house. The party promised to be a big event, with around 100 students from their high school filling the house and yard. Laughter, music, and the buzz of excited conversation filled the air as the students enjoyed the festivities. However, amidst the revelry, a few students noticed something, or rather someone who didn't quite fit in. A man who appeared much older than any of the high schoolers lingered at the party. His presence was unsettling, but in the chaos of a large gathering, no one thought to question it too much. Despite the unease that a few students felt, Mick, the host, didn't approach the man to ask who he was or to tell him to leave. When later asked about the stranger, Mick explained, "I've been to plenty of parties where random people show up. Sometimes I've even gone to parties uninvited myself. I never imagined anything bad could happen because of it. I was just curious about who he was." The night wore on, and the party continued, but the joy of the evening took a dark turn when Lisa's mother, Mrs. Corrado, called Mick's house later that night. She was frantic, asking if Lisa was still there, but no one had seen her for hours. Panic quickly set in. Mick and a few of his friends immediately began searching the surrounding streets, desperately hoping to find Lisa. They called her cell phone repeatedly, but each attempt went straight to voicemail, leaving them with a growing sense of dread. What they discovered next was beyond anything they could have imagined. As they combed the area, one of Mick's friends spotted the shady man from the party. He was dragging Lisa's limp body through the grass, heading toward the nearby woods. The sight of their friend in such a state was shocking, and the group yelled out, alerting the man to their presence. Startled, the stranger abandoned Lisa and fled into the dark woods. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't catch him. The horrifying truth emerged. At some point during the party, the man had drugged Lisa, rendering her helpless. His intentions were as sinister as they were unknown, and to this day, his identity remains a mystery. The memory of that night haunts those who were there, a chilling reminder of how quickly a night of fun can turn into a nightmare. Lisa's disappearance and the events that followed left a scar on the community, and the man responsible has yet to be brought to justice. It was Halloween night in 2005 in the small town of Frederica, Delaware, and the streets were alive with festive decorations. The town was in full swing for the holiday, with cobwebs draped over bushes, jack-o'-lanterns glowing on porches, and rubber monsters lurking in every corner. Amidst all the eerie decor, one more hanging figure didn't seem out of place. It was easy to assume it was just another spooky prop, blending in with the Halloween atmosphere. But as the night wore on, no one realized the chilling truth. A 42-year-old woman had tragically taken her own life by hanging herself from a tree along a busy residential road. Her body hung 15 feet above the ground, swaying gently in the breeze, unnoticed by the dozens of trick-or-treaters who passed by. To them, it was just another decoration, another creepy touch added to the haunted scene. The body remained there for hours, with passers-by oblivious to the grim reality. The darkness of the night and the nature of the holiday masked the horror of what had really happened. It wasn't until the next morning, as the first light of day began to reveal the details, that neighbors started to suspect something was terribly wrong. At first, they thought it might be a cruel Halloween prank, but as they approached the figure, the truth became undeniable. The unmistakable smell of death and the horrifying sight of the woman's lifeless body hanging in the tree shattered the illusion. The woman, whose identity was not disclosed, lived only about a quarter-mile from where her body was found. The tragedy was compounded by the fact that her death had gone unnoticed for so long, mistaken for just another Halloween decoration in a town full of them. What was intended to be a night of harmless fun had inadvertently concealed a dark and tragic reality.